Have you ever met someone who apologizes before they even speak? They soften their tone before expressing an opinion. They brace for disagreement before it happens. They laugh off compliments as if they're suspicious. They replay conversations at night, searching for the moment they messed up. And if you look closely, you'll see something else. They don't react to criticism. They anticipate it. Because for some people, criticism wasn't an occasional event. It was climate. Imagine growing up in a house where correction was constant, not guidance, not discipline, correction. The way you spoke, the way you walked, the way you dressed, the way you felt, the way you dreamed. Why would you do it like that? That's not good enough. Don't be so dramatic. You're too sensitive. You should know better. Over time, the child stops hearing specific comments. They start hearing a message. You are fundamentally wrong. And here is where psychology gets deep. The human brain is not built to evaluate criticism neutrally during childhood. A child's brain is built to absorb. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for critical thinking, is still developing. So when criticism is constant, the child doesn't analyze it. They internalize it. It becomes identity. Now imagine this happening daily. Not explosive abuse, not visible trauma, just steady, low-grade invalidation. Psychologists call this chronic negative mirroring. Children develop self-concept through reflection. When caregivers respond to emotion with curiosity and validation, a child builds secure identity. When caregivers respond with correction and disapproval, the child builds hypervigilance. Instead of asking, "What do I feel?" they ask, "Is this acceptable?" And something subtle begins to form. An internal critic, not a voice of improvement, a voice of surveillance. The child learns to monitor themselves constantly, before speaking, before acting, before dreaming. Because any expression could invite correction. Now let's fast forward. That child grows up. On the surface, they may appear competent, perfectionistic, responsible, highly aware, but inside, something never quieted. The internal critic is louder than any external one. Even when no one is judging them, they are judging themselves. And here's the neurological layer. Chronic criticism activates the stress response. The amygdala, the brain's threat detector, becomes hypersensitive. Criticism feels like danger. Even neutral feedback triggers fight or flight. The body reacts before logic can intervene. Heart rate spikes, mind races, because the nervous system learned that correction equals threat. Now imagine receiving constructive feedback at work, a small suggestion, nothing personal. Shame floods in, the mind spirals. I'm incompetent. They regret hiring me. I've ruined everything. This is not overreaction. This is conditioning. The brain wired criticism to identity level danger. Let's go deeper. People who are constantly criticized often develop one of two major coping patterns: perfectionism or avoidance. Perfectionism says, if I do everything flawlessly, no one can criticize me. Avoidance says, if I don't try, no one can judge me. Both are protective. Both are exhausting. Perfectionists stay up late revising emails, over-preparing for conversations, double-checking everything. Because imperfection feels catastrophic, avoiders procrastinate, underperform, or self-sabotage because failure feels inevitable anyway. Underneath both patterns is the same wound: conditional worth. Now here's something most people don't realize. Constant criticism does not just damage self-esteem. It disrupts self-trust. When you grow up being told your feelings are exaggerated, you begin doubting your emotional signals. When you're told your ideas are unrealistic, you begin doubting your intuition. When your mistakes are magnified, you begin fearing experimentation. Over time, you don't just fear external criticism, you fear your own judgment. And this creates decision paralysis. Simple choices feel heavy because the internal critic is scanning for error. Now let's talk about relationships. People who are constantly criticized often struggle with intimacy, not because they don't want closeness, but because closeness feels risky. Vulnerability invites evaluation. They may over-explain, over-apologize, or preemptively criticize themselves. I know this isn't good. I'm probably wrong. Sorry, that was stupid. They attempt to disarm potential judgment by criticizing themselves first. It's defensive surrender. And here's the tragedy. When someone genuinely appreciates them, they don't fully absorb it. Compliments bounce off because the internal narrative is louder. You're just being nice. You don't really mean that. You haven't seen the real me. Let's go into shadow psychology. Carl Jung spoke about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress because they were unacceptable. For a constantly criticized child, authentic impulses often became shadow. Anger was punished. Creativity was mocked. Sensitivity was shamed. So those parts were buried. But buried doesn't mean gone. They resurface as anxiety, irritability, depression, or unexplained rage, because suppression is not resolution. Now imagine adulthood. You're in a meeting. You have an idea. You hesitate. Your mind flashes back, not consciously, to every time your ideas were dismissed. So you stay quiet. And later, you feel resentment, not just toward others, toward yourself. Why didn't I speak up? But the nervous system remembers. Speaking up once led to correction, so silence feels safer. There's also something else. People raised in constant criticism often become hyper-attuned to other people's moods. They can detect micro shifts in tone, facial tension, subtle disapproval, because survival required it. This creates high empathy, high perceptiveness, but also high anxiety. They scan constantly for evaluation, even in safe environments. Now let's talk about shame. Shame is different from guilt. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am wrong. Constant criticism moves from behavior to identity. And identity level shame is heavy. It makes you shrink. It makes you hide. It makes you feel like exposure equals danger. And here's something surprising. Many highly successful people were raised in environments of high criticism, because criticism can create drive, a relentless need to prove, to validate, to silence the voice. But external success rarely silences internal criticism. You can achieve degrees, build businesses, receive praise, and still feel like you're not enough. Because the wound wasn't about achievement. It was about unconditional acceptance. Healing begins when something shifts, when you realize the voice in your head is not originally yours. It was installed, repeated, reinforced. And once you recognize that, something changes. You begin separating feedback from identity. You begin questioning the internal narrative. Is this true, or is this old conditioning? You begin practicing self-compassion, not as indulgence, but as recalibration, because the brain can rewire. Neuroplasticity allows new patterns. When you respond to mistakes with curiosity instead of attack, when you allow imperfection without collapse, when you speak up despite fear, the nervous system slowly learns something new. Criticism is not annihilation. Now, here's the emotional climax. Imagine receiving criticism, and instead of spiraling, you pause, you breathe, you evaluate, you keep what's useful, you discard what's not, and your identity remains intact. That moment is revolutionary, because for someone raised in constant criticism, maintaining self-worth during feedback is freedom. If this resonates, I want you to reflect. Do you apologize too quickly? Do you over-prepare? Do you struggle to accept compliments? Do you fear being found out? These are not personality flaws. They are adaptations that once protected you. But you are no longer in that environment. You are allowed to exist without constant correction. If this video speaks to you, comment below. What was the most common phrase you heard growing up? Sometimes naming it breaks its power. And if you want more deep psychological explorations like this into attachment, trauma, identity formation, shadow work, subscribe. Because understanding where your inner critic came from is the first step toward quieting it. You were not too sensitive. You were not too dramatic. You were responding to an environment of chronic evaluation, and the fact that you survived it, that you built awareness despite it, that you are still here questioning it, that is not weakness. That is resilience. And resilience, once conscious, becomes power.